Here is something that took me way too long to figure out. You can be educated, disciplined, and genuinely responsible with money, and still be completely, utterly stuck in the rat race. Not because you're not trying hard enough, but because some of the habits the middle class is literally praised for are quietly designed to keep you exactly where you are. Today, I'm going to walk you through them because once you say it, you cannot unsay it. Because in the next few minutes, you're going to find out why your education might actually be working against you, how to spot the red race traps hidden inside your responsible habits, and the specific shift that actually get you out. I want you to think back to the moment you felt like you would finally figure it out. Maybe it was your first real salary, or when you got approved for the mortgage, or when you finally had enough in your account that you stopped checking it every morning with one eye closed. That feeling of, okay, I'm doing this. I'm being responsible. I'm adulting correctly. I had that moment too. And for a while, I felt amazing. Every raise meant a slightly nicer version of whatever I already had. Better apartment, newer car, restaurants that had menus without prices on them, and each upgrade felt like confirmation. Like the system was working. Except nothing was actually changing. I was earning more, spending more, and somehow feeling just as financially anxious as I did when I was making half as much. The treadmill was just going faster. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out what was actually happening. And when I finally did, it came down to one image I couldn't shake. Picture a ladder. Every time you do something right, get the promotion, buy the house, make the lifestyle, society hands you the next rung. And climbing feels like progress because you're moving upward. But here's what nobody mentions about ladders. They have to be leaning against something. And if your ladder is leaning against the wrong wall, it doesn't matter how high you climb. You're just getting further from the ground with no way back down. Every habit I'm about to share with you, it's another rung on the wrong wall. Overlooking financial knowledge. Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. Could I actually be financially illiterate without knowing it? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The education system teaches you almost everything except the one subject that affects every single day of your adult life: money. How it works, how it grows, how it gets taken from you quietly, legally if you don't know the rules. And most middle class people assume that because they're educated, they're financially literate. Those are not the same thing, not even close. Think about that for a second. The average person knows more about how their car engine works than how compound interest, tax brackets, or asset allocation actually function. And that gap, that specific gap, is what makes every other trap on this list possible. You can't avoid a trap you can't see. I remember the first time I realized there was an entire language around money that nobody had ever taught me. I was sitting across from a financial advisor and he started talking about expense ratios, dollar cost averaging, tax loss harvesting, and I just nodded. Like I knew what any of that meant. I didn't. I was completely lost in a conversation about my own money. And the worst part, I didn't even know how lost I was until I went home and looked it up. There was the moment it hit me. I had degrees, I had read books. I considered myself an intelligent person. But I had been handed an entire adult life to manage financially with zero actual training on how to do it. And I had just assumed, the way most people do, that being smart and being financially literate were the same thing. They are not. And here's why this matters more than almost anything else on this list. Financial knowledge is the single most asymmetric investment you can make. One concept understood deeply can be worth more than years of extra income. Understanding how your tax bracket actually works could save you thousands. Understanding compound interest could change every savings decision you make for the rest of your life. Understanding the difference between an asset and a liability, in the real sense of those words, could redirect your entire financial trajectory. But you have to go looking for it because nobody is going to hand it to you. The system was not designed to produce financially independent people. It was designed to produce productive workers and reliable consumers. And the financially illiterate population is a lot easier to sell to, lend to, and keep in line. The ladder was always there. You just didn't know you were allowed to move it. And here's what's interesting. Most people, even when they sense something is off, don't go looking. And there's a very specific, very well reinforced reason for that: conforming instead of thinking independently. Let me ask you something. Am I making my own financial decisions? Or am I just following a script someone else wrote? Because there's a default life script the middle class runs almost automatically. Go to school, get a stable job, buy a house, save for retirement, retire at 65, and look, none of these things are inherently wrong. But most people follow that script without ever stopping to ask whether it's written for them or written for someone else's benefit. Think about who actually profits from the script. The banks benefit from your mortgage. Your employer benefits from your loyalty and your fear of leaving. The financial institutions benefit from your parking money in products you don't fully understand. Conformity is incredibly profitable for everyone except the person doing the conforming. And here's the thing about conformity, it does not feel like conformity when you're inside it. It just feels like being responsible. It feels like doing the right thing because everyone around you is doing the exact same thing and calling it wisdom. I made a financial decision once that I was completely convinced was smart. We are talking about responsible, mature, adult decision makings. I bought a car that was well within what the bank said I could afford. The payment was manageable, the interest rate was decent. It checked every box society told me to check. And it wasn't until years later when I actually sat down and looked at what the decision cost me in total, the interest, the insurance, the depreciation, the opportunity cost of what that money could have been doing instead, that I realized I had never actually thought about it. Not really. I had just done what people like me were supposed to do. And that was the most expensive part, not the car, the autopilot. Independent thinking in personal finance doesn't mean being reckless. It does not mean ignoring conventional wisdom entirely. It means pausing long enough to ask, does this decision actually move me toward what I want? Or am I doing it because it's what people like me are supposed to do? Because the most dangerous financial decisions aren't the ones that feel risky. They are the ones that feel obvious. Because obvious decisions don't get examined. And unexamined decisions are where the red dust lives. Nobody questions the mortgage because everyone has a mortgage. Nobody questions the car payment because everyone has a car payment. Nobody questions retiring at 65 because that is just when you retire. But what if none of that was written with your life in mind? Conformity didn't build your ladder, it just told you which wall everyone else was leaning theirs against. And one of the most conformist financial habits of all, one that gets passed down from generation to generation as genuine wisdom, is how we think about saving, or more accurately, how little we actually do, neglecting long term savings. Ask yourself this, how much is my future self going to pay for what I'm doing right now? Because most people know they should save more. That's not the problem. The problem is that long term saving requires you to feel the sacrifice today for a benefit you won't see for decades. And the human brain is genuinely terrible at that trade off. We are wired for right now, for this month, for this paycheck. So saving gets pushed just until after the holiday, just until the car is paid off, just until things calm down a little, and just until has a compounding cost that most people never actually sit down and calculate. So let me do it for you right now. Take two people, same income, same intention to saving soon. Person A starts investing $300 a month at 25 and stops completely at 35. Just 10 years of contributions. Person B starts at 35 and invests that same $300 every single month for 30 years without stopping, and assuming a 7% average annual return, which is constant with long-term S&P 500 historical averages. Here's what happens. Person A, who only contributed for 10 years, ends up with roughly $567,000 at 65. Person B, who contributed faithfully for 30 years, ends up with around $340,000. Person A wins by over $200,000, having contributed for a third of the time. That's not a typo. 10 years of early action beat 30 years of delayed action every single time, and the only difference between those people wasn't discipline or income or sacrifice. It was time. Person A just started earlier. That's compound interest, and it's either working for you or against you right now. There is no neutral. Time in the market is the one advantage that money cannot buy back. We can always earn more money. We can get expensive, get a raise, start a side hustle. But you cannot go back and give your money more time to grow. Every year you wait isn't just a year of missed contributions. It's a year of missed growth on top of growth on top of growth. The math gets brutal fast. Your future self is going to climb with whatever you left them. Right now, you're deciding how heavy that load is going to be. So we are not saving enough. But here's the other side of that equation. And it might be the more uncomfortable conversation. Because it's not just about we are not putting away. It's about where the money is actually going. Living beyond your means. Here's the question I want you to really sit with. Is my lifestyle working for me? Or am I working for my lifestyle? Because living beyond your means does not always look like maxing out credit cards. It does not always look like a crisis. Sometimes it looks incredibly reasonable. A house in a good school district that stretches the budget just a little. A car payment that is technically manageable. Dinners out because you work hard and you genuinely deserve to enjoy your life. None of those individual decisions look like a problem. But together, They quietly ensure that every dollar you earn has somewhere to go before it even arrives. And that's the trap. It's not one big catastrophic decision. It's 100 small reasonable ones that add up to a life where you're always just keeping in, never actually getting ahead. I want to tell you about something that happened to me that I still find slightly embarrassing to admit. There was one specific expense in my life that had crept in so gradually that it just felt completely normal. It was just part of the budget, part of the routine, and then one day I actually added up, not monthly, annually, and I just sat there staring at the number. The weight I spent, how much on that moment is real. And when it hits you, it's not the amount that's shocking, it's how invisible it had become, how completely unexamined. Just another thing I did because I had always done it. But here's what makes this trap so much stickier than it looks on the surface. The real trap isn't the spending, it's the identity built around the spending. When your lifestyle becomes your personality, when the neighborhood you live in, the car you drive, the restaurants you go to become part of who you are, cutting back does not feel like a financial adjustment anymore. It feels like a loss of self. Like you're going backwards, like you're failing. And that feeling, that specific feeling, is exactly what keeps people stuck for decades. Because you will take on debt to protect the identity before you will adjust the lifestyle that created it. Your lifestyle should be a reflection of your values, not a performance for other people. And once you actually get intentional about this, once you start asking which of these things genuinely make me happy versus which of these things I am maintaining for appearances, you often find that the things you thought you needed were never really the things making you happy anyway. The stuff that actually matters almost never costs what you think it does. Every lifestyle upgrade is another rung, and the higher you climb, the more terrifying it feels to look down. But here's what's underneath the lifestyle inflation conversation that almost nobody actually talks about. It's not really about how much you spend, it's about which side of the economy you're choosing to live on, prioritizing consumption over creation. Here's the question: am I building wealth, or am I just funding someone else's? Because every dollar you spend goes to someone who created something. And that's fine. That's literally how economies work. But the middle class is almost entirely trained to be consumers. Buy the product, subscribe to the service, upgrade the thing, get the newer version, and the wealthiest people in the world, almost without exception, got there by being on the other side of that transaction. They built the thing, they created the asset, they own the system that other people pay into month after month after month. And before you say, okay, I'm not the Elon Musk, I'm not starting the next Amazon, that's not the point. This isn't about building $1 billion company. It's about recognizing that there are two sides to every economic transaction, and the middle class spends almost all of its time, energy, and money on one of them. I had a moment that made this very real for me personally. There was something I was genuinely passionate about, something I spent money on regularly: courses, books, subscriptions, gear. I was a very enthusiastic consumer in this space, and one day it hit me that I spent years paying to be involved in something I actually knew a lot about. I had real skills, real knowledge, real experience, and instead of finding a way to get paid for any of that, I was paying other people who knew less than I did. The person on the other side of those transactions wasn't smarter than me. They had just made a different decision about which side of the table to sit on. The realization was uncomfortable and clarifying. This doesn't mean you need to start a business tomorrow. It doesn't mean every hobby needs to become a hustle. It means shifting even a small portion of your time, attention, and money from consuming to creating, from buying courses to build skills you can sell, from spending on experiences to build assets that generate something. The mindset shift from consumer to creator is one of the most financially significant thing a person can make. And it costs nothing to start. You don't need capital. You don't need a business plan. You just need to start asking a different question. Instead of what can I buy that will improve my life, start asking what can I build that will improve my life. Because consumption feels good right now. Creation feels hard right now. But in 5 years, the person who chooses creation has assets, skills, income streams, options. The person who chooses consumption has memories and a much emptier account. Both made a choice. The only difference is that one of them knew they were making it. Consumers climb ladders someone else built. Creators build their own. And once you start thinking like creator, something else becomes very obvious very quickly. The ceiling on what you can earn is a lot higher than anyone ever told you. Undervaluing your earning potential. Ask yourself this honestly. What if I'm worth significantly more than I'm currently being paid? Because the middle class has a deeply ingrained relationship with modest earning expectations. Ask for too much and you seem greedy. Charge too much and you will lose the client. Stay within the salary band, don't rock the boat, be grateful for what you have. This is the financial equivalent of playing not to lose instead of playing to win. And it has a massive compounding cost over a lifetime. So let me put a real number on it. A 10% salary negotiation win on a $70,000 salary is $7,000. That feels modest, almost not worth the awkward conversation. But that $7,000 does not just exist in year one. Every future raise gets applied on top of that higher base. Every job future offer gets anchored to that number. Every future negotiation starts from a higher floor. Research from Carnegie Mellon and other institutions consistently shows that most employees leave substantial money on the table simply by not negotiating. Not because they couldn't have gotten more, because they didn't ask. Undervaluing yourself once does not just cost you no. It costs you for decades. I learned this the hard way. There was a time I was given the opportunity to name my price for a project, and I panicked. I went low. Not because the low number reflected the value of what I was delivering. I knew it didn't, but asking for what it was actually worth felt presumptuous. So I charged less than I should have, delivered more than I was paid for, and smiled through the whole thing. When I ran the numbers later on what that decision actually cost me, not just the project, but the anchor it to set for every conversation after, it was painful. You're not being humble by undervaluing yourself. You're being expensive to your future. The key is to get uncomfortable with your current ceiling, because the discomfort is the only thing that moves it. You have been climbing carefully, not wanting to make noise. But the ladder has more rungs than they told you, and you're allowed to reach for them. So you start earning more. Amazing. But here's the final trap, and it might be the most dangerous one on this entire list, because it is the one that looks the most success from the outside, depending on one income stream, the single point of failure. Here's the question I want you to really think about. What happens to everything I have built if this one thing goes away? Because a single income stream is a single point of failure, and the middle class has normalized complete financial dependency on one employer, one salary, one source. For decades, that felt safe, stable, responsible even. But the economy has changed dramatically. Layoffs happen at companies with record profits. Entire industries get disrupted overnight. The idea that one job equals security isn't just outdated. It's genuinely risky in a way it simply wasn't for your parents' generation. And the Federal Reserve's report on the economic well-being of US households consistently shows that a significant percentage of Americans, including middle and upper middle income earners, could not cover a $400 emergency without borrowing. These aren't people who aren't trying. These are educated, employed, responsible people with one income stream and no margin for error. Here is what changed everything for me. The first time a small amount of money showed up from something other than my primary job. It wasn't life-changing. It wasn't even that much. But it was recurring, and the feeling that came with it was completely disproportionate to the amount. Suddenly, my relationship with my main job shifted. I sat differently in meetings, I negotiated differently, I made decisions differently, not because I was financially free, I wasn't anywhere close, but because living had a landing pad. And that changed everything about how you show up. Here's the thing, a second income stream does not have to be massive to matter. An extra $500 a month invested consistently is worth over $600,000 over 30 years at a 7% return. It does not have to replace your job. It just has to exist. Because the moment you have more than one source of income, you are no longer trapped. One income stream is a ladder with one leg. It works fine until it does not. Building a second stream isn't about greed. It's about giving yourself options, and options are the only real definition of financial freedom. The goal was never to climb higher on this one ladder. The goal was always to build enough of them that you never felt trapped on any single one again. That is what freedom actually looks like. Not a bigger rung, a different wall entirely. Now here's what's wild. Every single trap we just covered has one thing in common. They all cost you more than a sticker price. There is actually a name for it. It's called the poor tax. And it needs to be the next video you watch. I will see you there.